G'day and welcome to this week's Silly Point podcast. This week I'm joined by Tusha Bahil from India. He's a freelance journalist over there, and Declan Hooper from Wickets and Pickets. This week we are here to discuss cricket from the other side of the world for a change, rather than something that's happening in Australia. We're going to talk about the England versus India format test series, which starts on Friday in Chennai. And after the heroics of the Indian side in Australia, I can't wait for this series to start. Tusha, welcome. Declan, welcome.
G'day, how we doing?
Thank you for having me on.
It's a pleasure. Now, what's been the reaction to the win in Australia for the Indians, first of all, and how have you been after it? I presume you've been quite busy writing stories about it afterwards.
Yeah, it's been crazy, actually. People have been going crazy about it, and there's been a whole lot of excitement. No one expected India to even win one test match. But last time I was here, I remember saying that it could be a whitewash, but who would have thought it would be an India series win? So yeah, it's been dubbed as India's greatest series win overseas, at least. And yeah, the excitement is great. And now with Virat Kohli and all the injured players back, they'll be even more confident of beating England.
God, I know. I think me and Phil said at the end of the Test series that we were never predicting any Indian games ever again after all that. But here we are going to predict an Indian game, so this should be interesting, hey?
I'm just wondering whether Virat Kohli can get back in the side after leaving early. You know, does he warrant a place in the side?
Well, he might find it difficult, obviously, but yeah, he's the captain. They can't play without him. He's just gonna.
Yeah, well, they did pretty well without him in Australia, but I don't suppose you can leave out arguably the number 2 batsman in the world, I suppose, at the moment behind Kane Williamson.
Well, and Joe Root has been making a bit of a case to be back on his perch, so to speak. 4 fabulous innings in Sri Lanka. How crucial do you reckon he's going to be for these upcoming tests, Phil?
Joe Root is England's best player of spin by a country mile. So obviously that's going to play a huge part in the next few weeks. But it's also the fact that he's in the last couple of innings, he's managed to go big twice, really big twice, which has been part of it, something he hasn't done in the past. He's the thing about Joe Root that when he's mentioned in the Big Four, supposedly, that he doesn't turn his 50s into hundreds as well as the other guys do, like Smith and Kohli and Williamson. But in Sri Lanka, which is obviously similar conditions to India, he's done really well, and it was him that led from the front, and the other guys watching from the stands while he was doing the business.
Yeah, and I mean, speaking of conditions, India obviously rewrote all the history books over here in Australia, winning at the Gabatoir and everything like that. How important do you think it will be to get back on home soil for India, and how much of an advantage is that for the Indian team, Tusha?
India haven't lost at home since, England beat them, I think, around 10, 15 years ago. But since then, they haven't lost. So I think India are heavy favorites, and they'll fancy their chances, especially with all their big world-class players back. So I mean, they'll really, really fancy their chances, and they'll think that, okay, England maybe they have a few good players, but obviously you look at England's squad and you look at India's squad. India, I don't think they have any considerable gaps or weaknesses, and even the injured players are now back, so they really, really fancy their chances.
And look,
that England win a few years ago was like one of my favourite innings was Kevin Peterson when he got that 100. And they haven't really got somebody like that in the side other than Root that's like a real standout star man. I think the other person that's really going to be key for England is Ben Stokes coming back into the squad from missing out in Sri Lanka, because he sort of shores up that middle order, and he's another good player of spin. It's really important that he stands up. That top order for England looks a bit fragile with Burns, Crawley, and Sibley not making many runs in Sri Lanka. I know there's only 2 Test matches and they didn't have much practice, so hopefully they would have had a bit more, practice this time around. Might not all be spin either. I mean, this India's bowling attack with Ishant Sharma back in, and now Mohammad Siraj and Shardul Thakur, what we've seen of them added to Bumrah, they're gonna prove a handful as well. That it's not just the spinners. That back in the day, the India was always about which spinners are going to be the danger men, and you need to get your runs off the quick bowlers, but the quick bowlers won't give you many chances because they've got a pretty good quick bowling attack as well.
Yeah, I mean, we saw India's depth in Australia after it seemed like they were the walking wounded for the last couple of tests there. How important do you think that squad depth will prove to be when coming up against England, Tasha?
I don't think they will need that much squad depth. I don't think any team will ever suffer that amount of injuries on a single tour. They were quite unlucky with that.
Yeah. I think the kit man was going to get a run if any more fell down.
Yeah, I mean obviously they have great amount of squad depth, but that also comes down to so many states playing the domestic cricket here, and obviously with that amount of exposure and that amount of opportunity, it just leads to stars.
Yeah, and obviously going into the squads, as you mentioned, Ishant Sharma back, but also Bumrah back into the attack. He missed the last test at the Gabba. Ravi Ashwin coming back into the team. There's some players to choose from, isn't there?
Yeah, I think the only player they are missing right now is Ravindra Jadeja, and he's out with a long-term injury. But other than that, they have a pretty set team. I think there are only 1 or 2 spots that need to be sorted. Whether they will go with an extra spinner, an extra bowler, or will they go with 3 pacers, 1 spinner, and 1 all-rounder? So that's that balance of the team is something that they need to sort ahead of the game.
I was going to ask you, Tisha, about Hardik Pandya and Washington Sundar. Where do you think those two? Would you stick with Washington Sundar in that middle order? You're talking about an all-rounder, but at least he's like a spinning all-rounder, which might be better. Do you think they go with him instead of Pandya, or do you think that Pandya will come in?
Yeah, I think they could go with either way. Obviously, Pandya will only play as a specialist batsman, and I don't know if he'll bowl that much. So it depends on the conditions. Obviously, if they go with 2 spinners and 2 pacers, then they might be tempted to go with Pandya as the third pacer. Like if he can bowl a bit, like Cameron Green did in the India-Australia series, and otherwise, like if they go with 3 pacers and 1 spinner, then they might be tempted to go with Washington Sundar as the second spinner.
Obviously, Moeen Ali's back for England, Phil. Do you think he'll get put in the starting 11?
Well, I'd say I was looking for my starting 11 actually, and I haven't actually got a specialist spinner as such, other than Moeen Ali in there, because I think he proved in the last tour there that he does well in India. He's bowled well in India before, and he's batted well in India before. So maybe you have him as your main spinner. They've done that before. It's not a problem. I don't think Dom Bess set the world alight in Sri Lanka. I mean, he got 5 wickets in the first test, but then Sri Lanka batted like Brisbane's 5th grade team in that first innings in Gaul. So, and no disrespect to him. I mean, it's tough to get 5 wickets in a test match at any stage. But him and Jack Leach, yeah, they're all right. But I don't think they're not in the class of Ravi Ashwin at this stage. So maybe they can put. It's a toss up between Moeen Ali and Dom Bess. But if they want to go with an extra batsman, then Moeen adds to that. And also you've got Joe Root who can turn his arm over, and he's more than capable. He's not just a part-time bowler. He's he's pretty good on spinning tracks as well, and he's got a few crucial wickets in the Ashes before. So I think it's a toss up between Bess and Moeen Ali for that spinning role.
And Tasha, over to you. Just we saw a few changes at the top of the order and the openers for India in Australia. Do you think two openers we saw in Brisbane have now cemented their spots?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, they played really well, and obviously Prithvi Shaw and Mayank Agarwal did not play as well. So, and Prithvi Shaw has obviously been dropped anyway. So, I think it will be Shubman Gill and Rohit Sharma opening the innings. Yeah, they look really set, and they developed a good partnership together. So, it's really an easy choice. And I think at least the top four, there are no issues for India.
That's a pretty good top four, I reckon. That's a pretty
Top
good
five.
Yeah.
top five. Yeah, Rahane comes in as well, so
Top six, so not bad at all.
No.
Top seven.
It's one that Australia will be jealous about, that's for sure. Well, you mentioned it, Pujara. How the Rock? We saw his heroics in Australia. How important is he for India?
Well, for some reason, he was being criticized over the course of the third and fourth match for being quite slow and for not scoring enough runs during his first 100 or 150 deliveries. But I think it's quite important. I think the role he played cannot be underestimated, and he really helped them tire the Australian bowlers out. And by the end of the fifth day, they looked like they did not have any legs left, and Pujara was just like batting like he was facing his first few deliveries. So it was quite easy for him, and the role he plays cannot be underestimated. And again, against Archer and Broad, even though England will manage their squad better against Archer and Broad and Anderson, if he gets going and if he just holds down one end, it just makes things easier for the other batsmen.
Yeah, and speaking of Broad and Anderson, they seem to age like fine wine, don't they, Phil? 6 wickets for Jimmy Anderson again. Any questions whether he'll start for this first test in Chennai?
I hope they do start him. I don't. You never know with the England Test selectors. It just seems to be that they like this rotation thing. This rotation system, I think. But I was just looking at the bowling stocks, and there's really only Chris Wokes that they can turn to as well, who's really more of an all-rounder. He might be more suited to the Indian conditions, but then Broad and Anderson, those three are pretty similar. Maybe Archer's the one that they might not go with as much because it might not necessarily be all-out pace that you need in India. I don't know whether Tusha knows what the wicket's going to be like in Chennai, but whether it's quick or not, I can't imagine it being as bouncy as Brisbane. So it might not suit. I can't imagine it suiting Archer more than Broad, Anderson, and Wokes. So they might go that way. I don't know.
Yeah, I think the pitches in India are quite a bit slower than the pitches in Australia, obviously. But Chennai is a ground that can sometimes suit pacers. So I think maybe I don't know if England will go with 3 pacers, but if their rotation policies and their Sri Lanka squad is anything to go by, I would pick at least Archer because he's a game changer no matter what the format. I would certainly pick him, and maybe Anderson or Broad, one of those two for the first test at least, and then go with 2 spinners because England also have Ben Stokes, who's not bad at all with the ball. He's going to offer a lot of pace, Hutchin, and he's the game changer, so he can do the job for them.
Yeah,
I think.
Well, and we did see in England, obviously Broad missed the first test of the West Indies series, and it seemed like he came back a man possessed after that. So, I mean, if they wanted to play a bit of a tactical game or a mind game with Broad, maybe dropping him for the first test might be a way of getting the grip between his teeth. Not that I think he needs it at all, but the grip between his teeth to fire on for the rest of the test series.
Yeah, and it's I was just going to make the point about Ben Stokes as well, but Tusha got there. he's crucial. That because he bowls so well, and you can just throw in the ball and say, mate, just give us 5 or 6 overs at full pelt, just bowl short, do whatever, and he'll do a fantastic job for you. And it gives the other guys a rest. So maybe you only need to have 2 frontline pace bowlers, and you can play that extra spinner, either Jack Leach or Dom Bess in there, and still keep Moeen Ali in there as well.
They are supposed to travel to England after this series as well for like 5 test matches, and then there will be different conditions. So then England will be favourites.
Yeah, exactly. So it'd be interesting to see how this next couple of months goes for both England and India, especially with not much cricket going on elsewhere after the South African tour was cancelled by Australia.
Obviously, this is the first cricket that we've seen in India for a good while. Even the IPL was the UAE. How important do you think it is to get cricket back in India?
Yeah, obviously it's huge, obviously, because India is a cricket crazy nation, and fans won't be there at least for the first 2 test matches, so it's a bit of a blow. But it's huge for. The BCCI is obviously one of the biggest cricket boards in the world, and so for their finances, it'll be huge. And India is also supposed to host the T20 World Cup, so this series will go a long way in, showing the world that they can host it. Because I think Australia obviously cancelled the South Africa tour because maybe they saw that the job they did with England, so they thought, okay, with the second wave coming in, they may not be able to do so. To do a good job of hosting us, but if India can do the bio bubbles correctly, and if they can do a good job of hosting England, then the world cricketing teams will be a bit more comfortable coming to India for the World Cup.
Yeah, 100%. I think the jury's out over the Test Championships and how important it is, but we obviously saw towards the end in Australia, and obviously New Zealand have now qualified for the Test Championship. How important how important some teams have taken it, whereas others haven't as much. Has there been a focus in India on the Test Championship?
It's not been the main factor, obviously, but now that India is almost through, they'll think, okay, we just need to win one or two of the 4 test matches, and we're through. So they'll have a bit more focus on it. But before the Australia series, there wasn't as much focus on it, probably because when India was winning games easily, India faced, I think, South Africa and the West Indies at home. So those were easy series, and they did not have too much work to do there. But nobody thought that going into the Australia series, India would have any chance after that of qualifying. But now that they're in with a real chance, they'll probably think of it, okay, we can win this actually and go to the final. Now they'll focus a bit more on it.
And obviously, Phil, for you, England are, as we said, a real outside chance of getting in. And even I've read the other day that if the maths works, Australia's still a chance of getting in the Test Championship. But do you think it'll be a factor for England at all, or do you think that they'll just go out and play?
I don't think it'll come into their thought at all. I think they need to focus so much on what's going to be hit, coming towards them in India, that's really they can only look at. You only have to look at what Burns, Sibley, and Crawley did in Sri Lanka, or didn't do, for want of a better thing, to see how difficult it's going to be in India. I think the focus for those 3 guys is to try and cement their places in the side, because they're not guaranteed to be in there. There's, with Ben Folkes there, he can bat as well. He might come in as a specialist batsman. Then Johnny Bairstow obviously been left out of this squad because he's having a rest. So Burns, Sibley, and Crawley will need to have decent tours ahead of the return series in England against India. I think they will focus on the actual series itself rather than what comes next, because like you say, it's pretty much a done deal with the Test Championship. Like you said earlier, I'm not convinced that it was the year to have started it all up, considering what's gone on off the field and with the pandemic and stuff like that. I'm not convinced that it was the ideal time to start a Test Championship, because you've got to be fair to all teams. I mean, South Africa and England didn't play, so that where does that results come in? That doesn't, obviously they couldn't. I would imagine that England will fancy their chances in South Africa again after what they've done the last time, and then obviously South Africa and Australia don't get a chance to alter the positions on the table. So for them to have chosen this year as the start of the Test seems a bit odd to me. Maybe they could have held off a bit, and we could be talking about a proper, in inverted commas, Test Championship next year. That's no disrespect to India and New Zealand, because they've deserved to be where they are, because they played the best cricket. But we're sort of batting on a bit of a green wicket as far as COVID's concerned.
Who'd have thought New Zealand batting well on a green wicket, hey?
Yeah, I wonder how that happens.
Just looking ahead to the first test, I'm going to ask you guys what your starting 11s are for India and England, respectively. Phil, do you want to go first with your team and explain why you put who you have in?
Yeah, the top three sort of only out of the necessity more than anything else. There isn't anybody else. Sibley, Burns, and Crawley, and obviously Joe Root comes in at 4. In my eyes, he could even go up to 3 and drop Crawley down to 4, but I think he prefers going at 4. He gets his runs. Most of his runs have come at number 4 when you look through his career. I've stuck with Dan Lawrence at 5 because I think he deserves a spot after he batted pretty well in Sri Lanka. And then Ben Stokes comes back in at 6. Josh Buttler at 7. I've gone for Moeen Ali at 8. It's a toss-up between him and Dom Bess, I think, for the number 8, depending on how many spinners they want to go with. And obviously Moeen's a spinner as well, but he's more a batsman. I've gone for Broad, Anderson and Archer, purely because I want to see how those 3 play together, because we still haven't seen them play in the same side, I don't think.
And India, Tusha?
Yeah, I mean, the top 5 or 6 actually easily pick themselves. So Shubman Gill and Rohit Sharma as the openers. Then obviously Pujara at 1 down, then Kohli at 4, Rahane at 5, and Pant at 6 after his heroics in Australia. The only question is who will play at number 7, whether they will go with Wriddhiman Saha and leave Pant as a batsman, or if they'll go with Pandya, or if they will go with Washington Sundar. I would go with Washington Sundar as the second spinner, and or as the all-rounder / spinner. Then Ravi Ashwin at 8. Then 3 pacers, Ishant Sharma, Jasprit Bumrah, and Mohammad Siraj.
2 great teams. I'm going to ask you who your key man is for each team respectively. Phil, who's your key man for this series?
I think Joe Root is really key. I think Josh Buttler is another one that plays spin really well. I mean, he's done that in the IPL. I know it's in the short form of the game, and he's done that in One Day International. So Josh Buttler will want to try and cement his place, because obviously Johnny Bairstow's not there, so he hasn't got him breathing down his neck. But he needs to prove that to Ben Foakes that he's the number 1 when it comes to wicketkeeper batsman. Root and Buttler are key, and then Ben Stokes. You need the top order firing as well. So the other thing is how England's bowlers can restrict that Indian top order. I can imagine if Rohit Sharma and Shubman Gill get going on a flat deck in Chennai, England could be looking at 600 plus. Depends on it's not a bad top 5. You can go Rohit and Gill. Pujara you just stay at one end and bat forever. Virat Kohli comes and smacks it around a bit, and then Rahane just when he need a few quick runs near the end. Pant when he need a few quick runs at the end. I don't know. I'd like to win the toss and bat first in Chennai, I think.
Typical Phil there, asking for one key player and he names me 12.
Sorry about that.
That's okay, mate.
Joe Root.
And Tusha, for you, mate, who's your key men or key 12 men, as it may be?
Yeah, I will go with Virat Kohli. I mean, it's the easy choice, but he will be determined because people are saying, "Oh, India don't need Virat Kohli, at least not as captain anymore." But he will be determined. Okay, you won without me. Now let me show you how good I am. So he will definitely be determined to show that he is a level above or a class above the rest of the players. And I think he will be very key. For India.
I'd be interested to see Archer against Kohli. That'd be a contest. I'd love to see that.
Well, we not have long now, so Friday our time it all kicks off. We'll be doing daily videos. Phil, it's been a pleasure as always, mate. And Tasha, thanks for jumping back on. It's been too long, and we'll have to chat again soon. Make sure you like and subscribe to Wickets and Pickets. All the comments and stuff have been really appreciated recently. Let us know your first 11s in the comments below, and we'll see you again soon.